Welcome back, geographers. How did native peoples of Canada live before Europeans came to the area? The First Nations of Canada. The first people to live in Canada are called the First Nations. They are Aboriginal people, or natives, who lived in North America before Europeans arrived. The Aboriginals came from Asia during a period of cold called the Ice Age. The Ice Age affected where the first people lived. After the Ice Age, some Aboriginal people, including the Huron and Iroquois, settled in the eastern woodlands. They farmed, hunted, and fished. They also built villages and traded with one another. Other Aboriginal people lived in the west, along the Pacific Ocean. They made canoes and fished in the ocean and in rivers. They also hunted in the forests. They used the trees in the region to build their houses out of wood. The Inuit people lived in the far north. Few plants grow there, so they made shelters without using wood. They hunted caribou, which is an animal like a deer. They also hunted seals and whales on the water. Exploration and settlement. Around AD 1000, the Vikings arrived. They were the first Europeans to reach Canada. They settled in Newfoundland, but did not stay long. The next explorers to arrive were the French. In 1530, an explorer named Jacques Cartier came to Canada. He sailed up the St. Lawrence River and claimed the area for France. The area eventually became known as New France. In the 1600s, another French explorer arrived. His name was Samuel de Champlain, and he founded the first French settlement, Quebec, in 1608. Over time, more French settlers migrated to Canada. Some became fur traders. They traded European goods to the Huron, a First Nations people, in exchange for beaver furs. They sent the furs back to Europe. Other settlers were farmers and priests. Farmers grew crops that fed other settlers. Priests came to Canada to minister to the French people who were Roman Catholic. They also came because they hoped to convert native peoples to Christianity. In the 1600s and 1700s, France was a powerful nation. But soon Britain began to compete with France for the Americas. The British formed the Hudson Bay Company. They set up trading posts in Hudson Bay in order to gain some of the fur trade. In the 1700s, Britain and France fought wars. When Britain won a victory in 1763, France had to give up much of its land in North America. However, the British passed the Quebec Act. With this act, Britain allowed French settlers in Canada to keep their language, religion, and system of laws. During the American Revolution, many Americans moved to Canada. Later, in 1867, the British colonies in Canada were worried that the United States would try to take over Canada. They united to become the Dominion of Canada. This new nation was partly self-governing within the British Empire. Canada's leaders wanted Canada to expand all the way to the Pacific. In 1869, Canada gained the territory held by the Hudson Bay Company. Many Métis, who are the children of French and native peoples, lived on some of this land. The province of Manitoba was created for them. In 1871, British Columbia on the west coast agreed to join Canada. A transcontinental railroad was built to link eastern and western Canada. Transcontinental means continent crossing. Canada's leaders also made agreements with some native peoples of the West. There was a disagreement over the use of this land, and settlers pushed out the native peoples. In 1905, Saskatchewan and Alberta joined Canada. Meanwhile, gold had been discovered in the Yukon Territory. A gold rush caused problems, so a police force was formed in 1873. Today this force is known as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Canada grows and unites. In the early 1900s, Canada's economy had problems. It was based on growing food and mining, but prices for these products fell. In response, Canada became an industrial nation. Canadians built factories and used their mineral resources. They developed hydroelectric projects and transportation systems. After World War II, industry boomed. Agriculture grew, particularly in the West. To help feed the nation, granaries were used to store harvested wheat. The St. Lawrence Seaway made it easier to ship products around the world. Canada needed more workers, so its leaders made it easier for people to enter the country. Canada's population jumped from 12 million people in 1945 to nearly 35 million in 2012. Today, about half the population comes from Britain and France. Another 15% comes from Europe. About 6% have African or Asian backgrounds, and 2% are from the First Nations. In 1931, Britain granted Canada almost complete independence. Canadians could make their own laws, but the British government had the right to approve changes to Canada's constitution. In 1949, Newfoundland and Labrador joined the nation.